As we'll see, the concept of authentication has two sides to it, but we'll start with the first side, where Alice, to be able to get information from Bob, has to start out by proving that she's Alice. Often this takes the form of a password that Alice provides to log into some service. Now, if Alice sends her password in a packet that says, "I'm Alice and here is my password," Bob could check the password, but this is obviously a bad idea because it's subject to attacks. If we just send the password in plain text, then anyone can eavesdrop on that conversation and know Alice's password. Of course, we know better than this. We know that Alice should encrypt her password before sending it to Bob. For Bob to decrypt that password, Alice and Bob will need a shared secret. And we know that they could arrive at that using Diffie-Hellman. So let's say Alice sends her public key derived from her private key and some public information, the yellow paint. And Bob sends back his public key, and now they have a shared secret, so Alice can encrypt her password and Bob can decrypt that and allow Alice to proceed with whatever service Alice is logging into. So, is this good enough? Imagine that we have a man in the middle, Mallory, where Alice, in attempting to contact Bob, actually ends up contacting Mallory. Then with the protocol we have in mind, Diffie-Hellman works between any two parties, including Mallory and Bob. So Mallory can make a public key, send that to Bob, and the point here is that Bob doesn't know whether this is Alice or not because he's waiting for a password to find out that it's Alice. So for now, Bob plays along by sending his public key, and now Bob and Mallory can communicate with this particular encryption. Meanwhile, Mallory has sent a public key back to Alice, and they can also encrypt their communication. But they're separate encryptions, and Alice ends up sending her password encrypted, but sending it to Mallory instead of Bob. Now Bob is using the password to try to make sure that only someone with the password can use the service. So the problem here really is that Alice has not confirmed that she's talking to Bob. Her attempt to contact Bob was intercepted by Mallory. The general rule here is that a client like Alice should not send a password to a remote service like Bob without authenticating Bob first. So this is the sense where authentication runs two ways. Alice is trying to log in, but Bob needs to be authenticated as an intended receiver. We could try to have Bob provide a password, Alice challenging Bob somehow to get the conversation started, but then we just have the same problem again, flipped around the other direction, with man in the middle still a viable attack.